Ladies and gentlemen, Mollusk here. As some of you might be aware, Vince Ventrella has been setting weekly questions to encourage response videos from the Wargaming community, and basically stimulate content whilst we wait for Ninth to occur, and have something fresh to talk about again. One of the recent topics was women in Wargaming, and whilst I'm sure this video will be too late to join in, I thought it'd be fun to do anyway. There are lots of ways the topic of women in Wargaming could be discussed, but I think the main question most people, i.e. males, are interested in is why aren't there more? It's important to start any discussion by defining terms. Let's start with Wargaming because it's easy. This video is going to be limited to Warhammer because it's the only system I'm actually familiar with. Women are more difficult, so who are we talking about? It shouldn't have to be explicitly acknowledged that every woman, every man, every individual is a unique entity. Res ipsa loquitur. But I'll say it just in case. This video simply reflects the thoughts and opinions of two such entities. However, the human brain is seemingly hardwired to categorise, and doing so is virtually inescapable aspects of our worldviews and culture. Therefore, we will avoid getting needlessly academic and say that to a certain biologically, psychologically undetailed level, we're talking about humans with two X chromosomes. Include individuals with sex chromosome disorders or gender identity issues, or not at your own preference. Their numbers are unlikely to significantly alter the relevance of our discussion. Basically, when we say women, we all generally know who we're talking about. So without further ado, let us introduce our special guest, Lady von Carstein. Welcome to the channel.
Hello.
And so I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you is to tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your place in the hobby.
Okay, so I collect the undead army, and I started by collecting Isabella von Carstein and the Banshee. And I basically started because I thought that the models were interesting, and I liked the fact that you had their outfits to decorate and paint however you wanted to. So that was quite an attractive feature for me of the game. It was the painting aspect of it and being able to decorate it and style it as you wanted to. And then from there I've started collecting the rest of the army, and I've played a couple of games, but my main focus is really on the models and creating a kind of design for them that I enjoy and that I think reflects the whole army as I want to see them on the tabletop.
Okay, cool. So, the main question we're asking today here, I guess, is why aren't there more women involved in wargaming, and particularly we're talking about Warhammer. And we often hear a common suggestion as to a reason why this might be, why there might be not so many women in wargaming, is that the women in the fluff and in the models, represented in the models, are over-sexualized. As a female, and of course, we're just one opinion among many here, but from your perspective, what do you think of that?
Well, I wouldn't really say that any of the models really are over-sexualized. I think if you look at the models that especially Warhammer have, they don't tend to be particularly sexy, especially if you look at their faces. There's nothing particularly exciting going on there. But even the other ones, yes, you have some sexual aspects portrayed to a degree, in some models more than others, but there are so many of them.
But I think
that
so.
are
For example,
the
dark elf witches, which have, I think, basically thongs and bikinis.
Yes, but that's one example among the whole load of Warhammer armies that there are. And if I'm looking at the vampire count and I'm thinking about the Banshee, for instance, she's a great model, and I don't think she's over-sexualized in any way at all. What I suppose could be argued is that they are depicting a particular form of the feminine or the female body, you know, kind of small little waists, you know, long legs, big hips, big chests, all this kind of thing. But at the same time, it is fantasy, and if you are painting these models, you do want them, you know, and at the risk of kind of insulting every other girl out there, but you do want them to look pretty, and you want them to be attractive. And I have no issue, and I don't really think most women would have an issue with some of them being, you know, more clothed and others more scantily clad. There's a variety. I don't think Warhammer has gone out of its way to sexualize or stereotype women in that way, really. And especially when you also look at the 40k, then those models, yes, there are always going to be the ones that are more scantily clad, but really, I think that there's an argument for some of those models that they're over sexualized.
Scars
at all.
are sexy, right? Horrific burns.
Yeah, sure. So you know, I don't really think that the models themselves being over-sexualized or portraying a particular idea or stereotype of women is the main reason why women aren't involved in Warhammer or wargaming and such. It might be an issue for some women, but I don't think it's the primary factor or, you know, the underlying cause as to why there aren't more women in wargaming.
Okay then. So in your opinion, what are the underlying factors or reasons, the main ones, why we don't see more women involved in the hobby?
Well, first, it is quite time consuming, and it also involves a lot of money, and you have to give it quite a lot of attention. And I don't think that there are always necessarily as many women as men who are willing to give that much to a hobby, or certainly not one of this kind. But then the other main reason, I think, is when you walk past a Games Workshop or, you know, anywhere where people are playing these kind of fantasy games, in my experience at least, I've never walked past one of them and seen any other females in there. So the few times that I do go in there, it can be quite awkward. And I think if you are somebody who's maybe, you know, interested or curious and just wants to pop their head in and see what it might be about, the fact that you walk past, you've seen something in the window display that you think is actually quite interesting and you'd like to find out more, but then you just see guys in there, and it can be quite off-putting to go in. You might feel a bit self-conscious about it, and when you do go in, you either kind of get looked at as though you've walked into the wrong shop and probably shouldn't be in there, or, you know, and people kind of come over looking a bit skeptically at you because you're a girl that's wandered into this shop, or you have a slightly different reaction of just people staring at you, which again, it's not always the most appealing or inviting of situations to make you want to come back, to make you think, oh, that was really interesting, I'm going to go back. I might, you know, I found this model, well, what can I find out next time? And even the opportunities to go in and have the painting kind of guides or lessons or, you know, whatever. And they seem to have quite a lot of really interesting things going on in a Games Workshop, but I've never gone to one. And I think it would be quite unlikely for me ever to go to one, just because they don't seem particularly inviting to a female audience.
So you don't feel so comfortable in the shop, and you feel that maybe you make other people uncomfortable by being in there?
I think so. And especially because when you walk in and there are, the few times, you know, that I've gone in and that there are games going on, you do notice a shift in the atmosphere. And it's nothing that's particularly visible, but you get the sense like you're a female that's walked into this shop, and they often tend to be quite small shops as well. So you've walked in and you feel like suddenly the guys in there, especially the ones who are playing, are suddenly
more self-conscious.
More self-conscious, kind of censoring what they're saying perhaps a little bit more than they would normally. And you are aware that the atmosphere has changed slightly. Obviously, that makes you feel self-conscious because...
A bit of an outsider?
Like a bit of an outsider, and you think that, you know, oh, well, if the atmosphere has changed, it's probably because of me. And also, that doesn't make you want to come back again. And it doesn't, you know, I don't want to make people uncomfortable when I walk into the shop. I mean, most of the time, well, after the first few times you go in there, you just ignore it, and you think, oh, well, deal with it. I'm going to play it anyway, so get over it. But it doesn't if you're not the kind of person who's persistent, who's genuinely interested in the game and wants to keep playing and to see where else they can go with it, and who's got somebody else who's interested in playing it with them, then you're probably not going to persist in going back to the shop and overcoming those initial hurdles.
So one thing someone mentioned was this concept of bro culture, where guys get together and they're talking smack and they're horsing around, and you know, sometimes the conversations can really be quite shocking, as in it, you know, when you're with your mates you might talk about really taboo subjects, and in a way when you're with your friends, it's almost a test of how strong your friendship is as to how deep you can delve into these rather, you know, appalling topics. And it's been suggested that maybe that might not be such a inviting environment for women to come along and kind of join in with. How do you feel about that kind of thing?
They're probably right up to a point. You don't particularly want to go in and play and be talking a load of nonsense, you know, that kind of talk. But having said that, it's not the issue that it's intimidating. It's more just that I don't really think it's the kinds of conversations that you tend to have that much as a woman. Maybe, you know, especially not with men.
You've got plenty of guy friends.
I do, and they would talk that kind of thing anyway. But I think those are people that you know well. Whereas when you go to the shops and play, it tends to be an opponent that you maybe don't know.
Because I would say, as a guy going into and you know, meeting people that I don't know, you know, I wouldn't expect to have that conversation going on. I wouldn't feel particularly comfortable to have walked into that kind of thing with the people I'm not so familiar with.
But I mean, I have to say that none of the times that I've walked into a games workshop, none of the guys playing in there have ever been engaged in any conversation like that. They've never made me feel uncomfortable by the conversation or the interactions that they're having. Any discomfort that has arisen has been more to do with the fact that I'm aware that they're suddenly being a lot more self-conscious. So maybe those conversations do go on when I'm not in the shop.
So you'd say that's not an off-putting
I don't really think so. And I don't think the fact that there are more men playing is off-putting either. Because I can see that there's scope for that argument that, oh, you know, if there aren't enough women playing, then it doesn't attract more women to play. I don't really think that's the issue. Okay,
but you were saying earlier about how you walk past a shop or a gaming place and seeing no women, and it being a kind of like a male-only kind of a place. Would that not then suggest that, you know, having more women involved, kind of like a critical mass of women?
Yeah, but you don't need to see equal numbers of women.
Okay.
Is what I mean. It doesn't need, and I don't think you're ever going to get to the point where there are equal numbers of women and men playing the game, and it would be nice to see a woman in there that's not me. You know, that's what I mean by that. But I don't think that necessarily the fact that it's male dominated is off-putting. It's, of course, it would be nice to see more women playing, but that's never been an off-putting factor for me necessarily.
Okay then, so from what we've been discussing, it sounds like one of the reasons, at least, why women maybe don't get so much into the hobby is that the environment where people are often become hooked into the hobby isn't so comfortable or inviting for them. So what would be your advice then for how we might encourage women to get into the hobby?
Well, I think it helps a lot more if you've got someone who enjoys playing the game already. I know that was certainly the case with me. So having someone, whether it's a brother, a friend, a boyfriend, you know, whatever, that's playing the game, who already knows the rules, can give you some kind of advice as to maybe what army you think you might like to start collecting, give you some advice about, you know, tactics and things like that when you actually come to playing games. So
and play it or enjoy the hobby along with you,
because I think that makes a difference. If you know, it can be quite an isolating game in some ways when you think about the fact that you're just painting on your own. So you've got your little models, you've started painting, but it's a mainly
It's easy
solitary activity.
to hole up in the man cave, isn't it?
Yes. Or a woman
Or
cave.
a woman cave.
But I think if you have somebody who you are close to who enjoys the game already and already knows a fair amount about it, that you can then ask questions. So there's not that sense of effort and hard work and, you know, more investment in it of having to go and find out for yourself, what are the rules, what can this character do. If you already are friends with someone who knows a lot about it, then that really helps you to kind of get a bit more into it, and it will also encourage you to go and find out more for yourself, because if they know, you don't want to be the person that doesn't know, so then you'll try a bit harder to find out those rules, to find out more about the characters, about the armies themselves, and then also it becomes an activity that you can do together. So instead of just sitting there painting on your own, you can actually paint together. You can share different techniques for painting. You know, it becomes a more social activity. And even the games then, I think it's a lot nicer, and I don't think this is just necessarily for women, to be able to play with someone that you are familiar with and know
of course.
first, before you go off and start playing in the shops and all, you know, all the rest of that, because that can be quite, you know, quite frightening for anyone, whether they're female or male. So yeah, I'd say that a good way in is to get someone that you already know to then, you know, share it with the females in their life.
And so what would you say, one thing, one hook that, okay, so you've said share it with the females in your life, or it's that introduction through a friend kind of thing. If a guy was to say want to get his female friend into the hobby, what would be a lead-in that you would suggest?
Well, I think it's very dependent on what the particular woman in question likes or doesn't like. You know, obviously that then comes into personalities and individuals. I know that for me personally, what I liked about the models, as I said earlier, was looking at their design. So I actually liked the female models, and I found the female models a lot more interesting than some of the what I considered slightly more grotesque kind of characters in the game. So the fact that I could, they've got, I really enjoy their clothes. So, you know, that's probably quite stereotypical and you know, some gender stereotyping going on there. But I know that for me, I liked the appearance of the models, and I thought, it's a fun thing that I can do with my boyfriend. And while he's painting his weird, crazy, ridiculous-looking things with horns, I can be here sharing in the activity with him and actually painting what for me was the more interesting model, you know. And for me, it was the Isabella von Carstein one, and painting it with detail, and it becomes quite a creative aspect. So I think emphasising that creative aspect for females is probably more interesting than necessarily you get to go and battle loads of people. I think that can be a little bit more off-putting just because of how time-consuming.
Something to grow into, maybe.
Yeah. And because if you might just be someone who likes to paint and collect the models and not necessarily battle them. You might just want to have them and collect them, and I think that's fine too. That. Yeah.
Well, that's probably all we've got time for. So thank you for coming on and sharing your opinion, and I hope we'll see you on the channel again soon.
Thank you.